Last month, the NCAA and the nation's 5 biggest conferences agreed to settle a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit that sets the stage for a future revenue-sharing model that includes getting dollars directly to athletes. And to learn more about all this, we're joined by Victoria Jackson, a sports historian and clinical assistant professor at ASU's School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
The NCAA and the Power 5 conferences agreed to what?
They agreed to settle. So different course this time around. They're not going to fight and keep fighting and keep paying lawyers. They're going to settle. And that is, they have realized, amateurism is likely going to be found an antitrust violation. So this was an antitrust case. And so the settlement means, they're going to start paying players.
So what did the suit claim, and what was agreed to knock this suit out?
Yeah, it was claiming that, the no pay for play rules were a violation of antitrust law. And, we just had another big antitrust case that the Supreme Court ruled unanimously to say the NCAA and the member schools through their conferences were in violation of antitrust law. That was the Alston case. And so now schools can pay money to athletes for education expenses. This isn't education expenses. This is the monies that schools make through their conferences and through the NCAA for media rights deals.
Yes.
And a portion of that going to the athletes.
And I mentioned it sets the stage for a revenue sharing model sometime in the future. What kind of model and how far into the future?
Yeah, depending on how quickly this goes through, this is a preliminary situation that we're in. The judge is going to review it. It's going to go to the claimants, and they're going to say whether or not they like this, and then there's going to be a hearing. So if this is the settlement agreement, going forward, they're going to start paying about 22%. The schools get to opt in, so it's not mandatory. A school can revenue share 22% and with any athletes they'd like. So it might just be football and basketball. If a school decides they want to pay all athletes, 22% of that. And then that percentage will increase over time because they're anticipating more money being generated.
Well, and are they not anticipating back damages as well?
So they're paying back damages. And this is a controversial piece across all of Division I. So $2.75 billion will be paid to former Division I athlete since 2016, because there's only 4 years that you can go back, and this case was filed in 2020. So that $2.75 billion is going to be split where the NCAA is covering 40% of it, so about $1.1 billion, paying out over a 10-year period. And then the rest is a reduction in the sharing, that the monies that go from the NCAA to all of the conferences in Division I. The rest of that, and it's the Power 4 conferences, since the Pac-12 no longer exists, but also those other conferences that are not part of this lawsuit. So the reduction in payouts will be shared across all of Division I, and that's why it's controversial.
Okay, so is there a cap on any individual athlete, how much that athlete can be paid?
Well, this is what gets them into trouble with antitrust laws, right? You can't collude to place an artificial cap on what, in this case, athletes are receiving from their schools. So what we're going to see is a switch from scholarship caps, a cap on the total number of athletes who can get scholarships for a particular sport, to roster limits. So, there were 85 total scholarships on a football team, which that's a lot of scholarships. We may now see roster positions. That's one change.
So roster sizes could be cut as far as the major. What about the Olympic sports? What about the sports that aren't basketball and football?
Okay, so we've had conversations about this in the past, where I come on and tell you this is a bad business model to put all this pressure on football players to generate revenue so that it supports all other sports and all other athletes on campus. So instead, we need new revenue streams and new models for the Olympic sports. Now, part of what will be negotiated in this settlement is, this piece where whether or not other sports will be kind of treated the same as football and basketball players. I would say that's a massive error and mistake, because these are different industries being operated by institutions of higher education.
Right.
We have an opportunity to rethink the Olympic and Paralympic movement in this country right now. We're hosting an Olympics and Paralympics coming up in LA 28. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic movement is going through a redesign project right now too. Colleges and higher ed needs to be part of that. And we need to bring communities in to be sharing in the world-class facilities that we have on college campuses with elite Olympic and Paralympic development, being the college teams at the top of that pyramid and more play opportunities, you know, in our higher education institutions, which are supposed to be community serving.
Right, and Title IX implications, what am I seeing here?
Yeah, you know, we just celebrated this 50th anniversary of Title IX, and the regulations for Title IX were really laid out 50 years ago, before the business of college football really accelerated and grew. Now, that was also a time when we were like, oh yeah, football is an education program. All of the sports are education programs being offered by universities. And so of course we need to have equal opportunity in these education programs on the basis of gender, absolutely. But football is the story here.
Yes.
That is the money, right? And so that industry needs to be figured out. I think we need to figure that out. You know, we're the only place in the world that plays American football. It's why this has grown in the way that it has. Our other sports on campuses are very much part of a global ecosystem. We have many international athletes playing in those other sports, you know, having these world-class opportunities. And those sports are the ones where we can have gender equity in a sport-by-sport basis. Baseball, softball, track and field, right?
Right.
Volleyball, soccer. We don't have a men's soccer team at ASU. Maybe this is an opportunity to introduce one, and we can think of gender equity in that way.
Last question before you go, real quickly here. Amateurism in college athletics, you kind of refer to this, but is amateurism in college athletics dead? And what does this mean for college sports?
Well, amateurism is an antitrust violation. That is what the Supreme Court told us in Alston in 2021. The world abandoned amateurism when the Olympic movement abandoned amateurism. The U.S. is the only place that has continued to pretend that amateurism is some sort of, you know, sport for sport's sake, morality, purity. If you take money, it somehow ruins the game. It doesn't ruin the game. Athletes were making money. Right? I mean, the benefits, we've seen the NCAA commercials that air during championships talking about all the benefits that go to athletes now. You can't collude to place a cap on those benefits. And also, we need to get, we as in higher ed, we need to get our house in order and figure out what these different industries are to best serve the students who play sports on our campuses.
That's a big house to get in order. Victoria Jackson, thanks for clarifying some of this for us. We really appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thanks a lot.